For a long time now, everyone's favourite anonymous explorer, Drukpa Kunli, has been telling people about the concept of Africa time. And this is a fascinating thing that when I first heard it, I thought, that's got to be nonsense. But I think we can agree that it has been substantiated at this point. He says, describing from a book about a European who's going to go and catch a bus. Quote, "We climb into the bus and sit down. At this point there is a risk of culture clash, of collisions and conflict. It will undoubtedly occur if the passenger is a foreigner who doesn't know Africa. Someone like that will start looking around, squirming, inquiring, when will the bus leave? What do you mean when? The astonished driver will reply. It will leave when we find enough people to fill it up." The European and Africans have entirely different concepts of time. In the European worldview, time exists outside of man, exists subjectively, has measurable and linear characteristics. According to Newton, time is absolute. The European feels himself to be time's slave, dependent on it, subject to it. To exist and function, he must observe its ironclad, inviolate laws and inflexible principles of rules. Africans apprehend time differently. For them, it's a much looser concept, more open, elastic, and subjective. It is a man who influences time, its shape and course and rhythm, man acting, of course, with the consent of the gods and ancestors. Time is even something that man can create outright, for time is made manifest through events, and whether an event takes place or not depends, after all, on man alone. If two armies do not engage in a battle, then the battle will not occur. In other words, it will have not revealed its presence. Time appears as a result of our actions and vanishes when we neglect or ignore it. It is something that springs to life under our influence, but falls into a state of hibernation, even non-existence, if we do not direct our energy towards it. It is subservient, passive essence, and most importantly, dependent on man. Now, this, you might think, is a caricature. Surely that's not the case. But, my friends, I believe it is the case. So, you may have been one of the 28,000 people who went over to lotuses.com and watched The Death of Man, my first documentary on there, in which one of the sections of the documentary is me describing how Western European men came to the view of time that we have. And I think that the clock, the actual mechanical clock, was instrumental in this, because up until the 14th, 15th centuries, clocks, timekeeping generally, had always been something dependent on nature. It was either done by sand, or it was done with water, or it was done with the sun, or something like that. But not Western European man. He created mechanical clocks that were powered entirely by human artifice. You wound the clock in the morning, and then it went all day until the next day, when you wound it again, and so on and so forth. So time became something independent of the natural cycles to man. Time became something that was purely mechanistic, but also essentially the product of human labour. But it became separated from the natural world and eternal. Time was objective and universal all of a sudden, because man could create a clock that would slice it into equal parts, and so we could measure how long each thing took. This was fairly unique because, like I said, in all of the times and places, it's dependent on some kind of natural cycle, but we're the ones who made it abstract and remote from the natural world, and remote from people as well. Because once the clock has become an automated mechanistic thing, then it's out of our hands, right? Like, even now, we've got loads of clock towers from the 1400s scattered across England and the rest of Europe, where these mechanical clock towers would announce to the whole village what time it is. And so everyone knew what the time was, and it wasn't something that was a mystery to people. And we've had this for hundreds of years, at least 600 years. And so this video, as you can see with 28.5 million views on it, did the rounds. And I think it's worth putting into perspective that the difference in culture, the difference in the way that people view things. Let's have a watch.
What if I told you that for many African societies, the concept of the future doesn't exist, and that instead of time moving forwards, time actually moves backwards?
I would believe her, frankly. I think that there's no reason to not take them at their word. Like, if this is how they perceive time to be, That's fine, but we don't perceive time to be like that. We see ourselves oriented forwards, looking into the future, and what's happened is behind us. But what she's saying is there isn't really a future that you can see. What there is the past and the present, the past getting further and further away. So essentially what she's saying is the Africans view themselves as walking backwards through time, which is a genuinely fascinating thing to me. And it's completely the opposite of the way we view these things.
This was the work of John Mbiti, one of Kenya's and Africa's greatest philosophers. And in 1969, he wrote something that completely reimagines the way we think of African time. Mbiti says time is a two-dimensional phenomenon with a long past, vibrant present, and virtually no future.
That really is incredible, isn't it? The idea that time is just a two-dimensional phenomenon where there's a long past, but how long this past is, she'll tell us. A very vibrant present, but nothing happens in the future. Because as far as she's concerned, the African is looking backwards and not forwards. And so suddenly the fact that, like, many African cultures don't have a word for maintenance makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If you're not predicting the future, well, why would I need to do anything with the thing that's currently working in the present? And it worked in the past, and that's basically all time that there is. So what do you mean by maintenance? It's working. Even though it might not be working tomorrow, it's working now. And that's what they're telling us.
Long past, vibrant present, and virtually no future. Using Swahili words, he describes the two dimensions of time. The first one being sasa, the now, the recent past, and the immediate future which can be experienced.
Right. So basically, what you can perceive happening through constant conjunction, as Hume would put it, is in the direct action. If I throw this ball, I know the ball's going to go. Yeah, that's a direct piece of time that is technically in the future, but it's immediately perceivable because I'm the one who's about to do this thing. Whatever's happening right this second, I'm holding the ball, and whatever happened just a minute ago, I picked up the ball, right? Someone on Twitter pointed out this is kind of like Mario, except instead of Mario moving forward through the level, revealing it through personal action, that Mario is stationary and the level is moving around him. And only what is visible on the screen is rendered in time. As in, whatever it is, wherever Mario is, that's time. Right? So Mario knows he's going to jump over here, but he doesn't know what's going on all the way over here. And it's like, well, that's I don't think it's an uncharitable representation of what she's saying. I think that is what she is telling us. And so right, okay, we do not understand people with this kind of worldview. And it's no wonder that they have trouble fitting in Western Europe, say. Like, they again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, they're just not like us, and you don't understand them. And, like, there's no way any Western liberal really grasps what she's telling us here.
The second dimension is Zamani. Zamani is the vast, endless past where all events eventually go on to live forever.
Now, this is a fascinating concept, because I guess we kind of have something equivalent to Zamani, and we call it history, right? So for us, because time is linear and predictable, we treat time as if it is measurable, categoric, and recordable, as in we have homegrown written languages. So a lot of African societies simply don't have any written languages. So the concept of a dictionary is kind of crazy, because the entire scope of the words in the language are contained only within the living speakers of the language. So you don't know what words have been forgotten over the millennia and what words are currently used now. I mean, there are going to be people who use words that other people have never heard of, and they're going to have no way of referencing and figuring out what that word means unless they just get that person to directly explain it to them. And so history is kind of the same. So the Zamani, I guess it's this kind of mythological period. So if it is remembered in myth and legend, then it will be in Zamani, and it will kind of exist. Whereas we write things down in each era that we go through, and so we have it's still linear, it's still a narrative, chronological, meticulous in many cases, recorded history in which we can actually gain quite a solid view of cause and effect and the steps of how we came to where we are. So we have a natural advantage here that we can make an orderly presentation of our own history to understand how this affected this and that affected that, and so on and so forth, until us now. What she's saying is, in the Zamani, there's just things. Again, there's no ordering, there's no cause and effect, there's no one coming after another, because they had no way of measuring that time anyway, and they didn't think like that. That is an alien and Western concept. So this, again, means that they're forever living in this kind of present. And I guess this becomes something akin to the Aboriginal dream time, where it's like, yeah, at some point long ago, something happened, and we have a myth and a legend of it now that persists only as long as we keep telling the legend.
But the future in African thought, it barely exists, because time is made up of events. Time has to be experienced in order to be real. So because we can't conceptualize events tied to the distant future because they haven't been experienced yet, then therefore the future cannot constitute part of time.
What a remarkable way. I love the way she's proud of this. She's like lecturing us. Like, yeah, we only believe in time that we have presently experienced. So if we haven't presently experienced it, it's not something real, and it's not going to happen. Even though you can know that if you didn't pay your rent this month, by the end of the month you're going to get kicked out or something. You 100% know that's going to happen because of your understanding of the way that things can be projected into the future. But if they don't think like that, it kind of explains a lot of things. And so, I mean, I'm trying not to be mean, but this is very revelatory, right? This reveals much to us about behaviors that we look at and say, why are they doing these things? And actually, this ties together with quite a lot.
And this is why, according to Mbiti, African languages, at least the East African Bantu languages that he studied, don't have a word to describe the distant future. In African time, according to Mbiti, events create time. Seasons, ceremonies, a conversation, those moments produce time, and people produce as much time as they need. And
so, again, this is absolutely fascinating. So this is basically going back to, I mean, to find such a thing in Europe, you would have to go back thousands of years to what is essentially a kind of archaic, heroic culture. Think of, like, I don't know, the ancient Celts running around beheading each other and, you know, fighting battles naked, right? That's the same sort of principle where it's like deep heroic time, where time is measured in deeds and not days. Things make the time honestly, I mean, there's something kind of charming about it, frankly, that I find quite sincere and endearing, as in they all think they're living through a personal Iliad, and so it's their behavior that makes the time, as in the events of the Iliad are told because someone did something, right? And even then they've got more of a grasp of time than what she's saying here, but someone did something, and therefore the story has happened. And so these people are living in a story in which, until a narrative beat is hit, nothing happened. And like when you're reading a novel, there's no point describing 5 years of a guy getting up every day and going to work and nothing substantive to the plot happening. So you just skip it. And that's kind of what she's describing the African experience to be. And that kind of explains the milling, right? It explains the just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for time to happen. Like, and that I think is what she would call like a way of generating time or something.
The example that Mbiti uses from the communities that he studied is that a year is measured based on 4 seasons, 2 dry seasons, 2 wet seasons. So a year is only over when those 4 seasons have taken place. So a year could take 365 days, 390 days. It doesn't matter the number of days in a year. What matters is that the 4 seasons have taken place.
Now, this isn't even unreasonable, right? This is perfectly rational for this kind of community, an agricultural community that lives in a place that is generally fairly bountiful. that you're not going to endure harsh winters in, and that you don't have any expectations beyond getting the harvests. Right? That's actually not an unreasonable thing, but it is a very ancient and, dare I say, archaic way of looking at not just time, but just the universe around you. One thing I like about reading ancient pagan writings is they have a similar sort of perspective, where the universe is this giant mysterious cosmos that in which things happen and you can't really predict into the future. And so you are constantly at the whim, the direction of the gods. And that's why you pray to the gods. That's why you sacrifice to the gods. Because you've got no agency over the future. I mean, you might not even believe in the future. And so you just hope that by performing the proper religious rites, the gods will give you a good harvest, or will make sure that you defeat your enemies in battle, or whatever it is. The perspective is very sort of human-centered, and you're looking at this giant cosmos, and you're wondering, not even wondering, you just don't understand how it all works. And so that's the perspective that she's describing here. And again, I've got to say, I do find it kind of charming. There is a kind of innocence to it that I can see why some people might find this way of life appealing, frankly. But again, it's so different to our existence that it's like night and day.
And this is in contrast to the Western view towards time, where time is a commodity, something that can be spent, saved, wasted, or lost.
Now that is only possible if you can predict time in advance. If time is not generated by the deeds of people, and you know that actually there are 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 365 days in a year, and this can be predictably managed, as in you have a calendar in which you make appointments and arrangements, and you know that you're going to do something in advance, and someone else knows you are going to do something in advance, so you can both and collectively make plans and actually make things come into being at will. Then not only do you have mastery over the future, but you have mastery over time itself. Again, you can spend, save, waste, or lose time by doing things. You can do this, and this makes sense to say. But if you're someone who thinks that time is generated by your deeds, this is nonsense. Like, this is a preposterous way of looking at things. And it kind of explains why Kemi Badenoch's always late to her meetings.
And according to Mbiti, this is why if foreigners come to Africa and they see people sitting under a tree, they would remark that, okay, why are these people wasting so much time? But in African thought, that sitting under a tree, it's not wasting time. It's either waiting for time or producing time. For me,
I think that's so great. I genuinely find that funny. Yeah, what are you doing? Well, I'm sitting around and storing up my time until something happens. And it's like, yeah, but the thing would have happened, like with the bus schedule. If you just arranged it, then you could have done something else during that period of time, and you would still get on the bus at the right time, right?
I think this Western idea of time as a commodity is what drives this Western obsession of progress, development, and some promised future. And this difference shapes everything from politics, economics, to how we live our daily lives. Because in African thought, the golden age isn't in the future, it's actually in the Zaman. According to Mbiti...
Oh my God, she's right that the Western concept of time is deeply tied to our concept of progress and improvement, and creation, invention, discovery. The Faustian spirit itself is tied to our view of time, that there is a future that we have agency over. If Africans always believe the past is where the golden age is, you can see why they're not building anything. Like, what would be the point in investing in something, working hard, if the future is, there is no future, and it's the past where all the good things were? So what's the point in preparing for tomorrow if yesterday was the golden era? And in 10 years' time, what are you talking about? There is no 10 years. What are you talking about? This makes no sense from this perspective. So the development of Africa, everyone always wonders, why has trillions been poured into Africa? And yet they don't seem to be any better off now than they were in the 1980s, when they're doing the Live Aid concerts and stuff. Well, this would explain it, right? Like, this would be a reasonable explanation from her as to why the Africans don't develop in the same way as, say, the Chinese or any of the other cultures who have a forward-looking view of time.
The future is only a shadow until it comes to the present, and then it flows into the Zamani. So in that way, time moves backwards. We are not the ones who move forward into time. So
she's literally saying we're walking backwards through time. And it's like, okay, maybe you are. I mean, that sounds like a curse. But maybe you are. But actually, if you turn around and say, right, so if we've got the Western calendar and we can predict what will happen next year, next 2 years, next 5 years, you could make a plan that's stretched over that time, fulfill it, and then have all of the benefits of that in that moment. Like, it's not, I don't think it's beyond their comprehension.
of course, Mbiti wrote this from a theological point of view because he was trying to explain the nature of African religion. But my main takeaway from the parts of the book that I've read is that unlike Western cultures and religions with end-of-the-world myths, African time has no end. Seasons, years, birth, marriage, death, it's all a cycle.
Oh, I believe it's going to go on forever.
Asante kwa kutazama.
That is just such a spectacular little lecture from that lady. Like I said, I've ordered the book. It cost me 200 quid. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I hope it goes into way more detail than what she's listed here, because I find this absolutely fascinating. And to be honest with you, I'm not even trying to be condescending or contemptuous or anything like that. I find the idea kind of, in a way, kind of romantic. Again, like harking back to the sort of heroic era, almost. But I think it is worth noting that this is in every way different to the Western experience, as she's telling us. And as we can see from our own history and our own methods of being, again, for hundreds of years. Like, this has been a truly fascinating journey for me, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with it, because I do enjoy the differences between cultures. I just think that we need to understand them as much as we understand ourselves. Anyway, I'll leave a link to The Death of Man in the description. Do go and watch it. Come and support us, only £5 a month. Trust me, this is going to be worth your time, and I'll see you in the next video.